All right, thank you. There's Cheryl Pounder, Jeff O'Neill, and Bob McKenzie. You know, the Russians haven't been at this tournament in 4 years, and it's almost like as soon as the Russians stopped coming, the Czechs stepped up to be not only the new Canadian rival, but suddenly the new Canadian nemesis, particularly these last 2 years in the quarterfinals, which have painful parallels for Canada, goals in the last minute to knock them out in the quarterfinals. There's a lot to unwrap here, but ultimately, what was the downfall for Canada?
You have to look at it in the micro and you have to look at it in the macro. In the micro picture, this was a very heartbreaking loss for Team Canada. It was really a tremendous effort in the third period. Team Canada finally parked whatever baggage they'd had all tournament, and they started to play free and easy with emotion and played a game that everybody had been waiting for them to play. They played fast, they played hard, they played smart, and in the third period, they got the game all tied up. And then the referee, the Finnish referee, I believe Riku Brander, made a call on Andrew Gibson. He called it kneeing. Judge for yourself. It's not, I look at that over and over again. To me, it's not a knee. They went thigh on thigh. He went through the body, and that's not a kneeing penalty. But
so did they get robbed in the end?
Well, let me go to the macro picture for a second then to answer that question. The macro picture is they were totally plagued by a lack of discipline throughout the tournament. They lacked scoring when they needed it. They lost the special teams battles throughout. They were grinding the gears game after game after game. With the exception of the first game against Finland, they ground the gears on just about every facet of the game outside of goaltending and team defense. And they put themselves in a position to suffer the vagaries of a call from a referee in a game like that because, I mean, in a perfect world, if Canada plays even close to what they're capable of playing, they're playing Slovakia or Switzerland in the first round in a quarterfinal, as opposed to their nemesis, the Czechs, who played a great game.
The players got to be saying to themselves, though, James, it almost took the last period of this tournament for them, and they finally got some chemistry going, and then they're living and dying by a call from the referee that did not look like a penalty. So they've got to be saying, we play so hard, we might have finally got it together, and now we're living and dying with a brutal call from a referee, and they ultimately score in a power play. It seems like Team Canada, they had a bunch of chances in the third period, and a coach adjustment that I would have made halfway through the first period of the Latvian game, putting Gavin McKenna with Easton Cowan on that line with Richie, and they were all over the ice. They were generating. The crowd was into it. They were feeding off the forecheck, and then the ref made a brutal call, and it was game over.
And you're right. The call, and a lot of Canadians will sitting here saying exactly what I said. They got robbed.
You cannot argue that the call stunk.
Yeah,
you cannot argue that.
Well, I didn't think the Baudouin one was a five.
Exactly.
Neither.
Exactly.
The referees had a bad night, but Canada had a bad tournament as well. And, you know, tonight the worst bookends possible with a goal in the first minute and then a goal in the last minute. But if you look back again, macro, as Bob likes to say, the first period really crushed them.
Well, it did, and they weren't able to get the crowd into it because they were chasing the game the entire time, and it's really tough to do, and you start off the game, and you want to fire on all cylinders, and then within a minute, you're down by one, and you really want to start on your toes, not on your heels, and unfortunately, Canada started on their heels. You see that one's going to get by Carter George with the redirect, and then an unfortunate bounce, yes, but again, it's on the power play for the Czechs, and they're able to get ahead with that one, but again, it's finding ways to play the game and manage it. At 2 seconds, you see Chalet get that goal again. So I just found that they were chasing the game, like you said, until that third period where you finally felt like they found their mojo. And I didn't like the calls. I didn't like the calls. The Baudouin, I did not think it was a major, and I did not think that hit by Gibson was a call. I mean, a knee call in particular, especially when the direct line was through the chest. You know, there was no left to right action. The knee was through the legs. I didn't agree with it.
You knew when the Czechs got to 3 in the first period alone, it was going to be a difficult mountain for Canada to climb. They've had so much difficulty scoring after that first game where they put up a 4 spot against Finland. You're like, okay, this is a typical Canadian team. But then for some reason after that in the Latvia game, their offensive struggle started. And when that team got to 3 in the first period, you almost thought they're really in tough to put up a 4 spot to win this hockey game.
You're so right, though, how maybe besides the Finland game, the third period was probably Canada's best period of the tournament. The shots were 16-4. So why did it take so long to get that chemistry, to get that desperation? Why did it take 5 full games?
Some might call it patience from the coach. I call it stubbornness and a lack of making an adjustment. When you're seeing a team, this is not an 82 game or a 66 game season. When you see offensive struggles, you've got to make some adjustments to get some quick chemistry on the fly. He refused to do that, but you saw what could happen when you do it in a third period of an elimination game. And that's why I don't understand why some of these changes weren't made earlier. You've got to go with 2 lines and possibly some other guys in the third line to rely on them as threats. To go with a 4-line approach of nobody creating offense was a crazy idea from the coaching staff.
But I also thought that the players themselves sensed that had a greater sense of urgency in the third period than any other time in the tournament outside of opening night. And I think that's a big difference too. It didn't. There were times when the coach and they were trying to put this guy out with that guy, and you still weren't getting a response.
Yes.
And tonight you got a response in the third period. It's funny because the profile of just playing okay or not great for a couple of periods. It started in the pre-tournament games. When they played Czechia. They were not that good in
only
the first 2
until
periods,
the third.
and then they rolled in the third and
Same
came
with
on
Sweden.
strong. And against Sweden, they had the bad first 2 periods, very sleepy first 2 periods, and in the third they took the game over. So they took that game over in the third period, but they dug themselves a pretty good hole. And as I said, they subjected themselves to the vagaries of a call that a lot of people are going to look at and say, and then there's going to be other people who say, well, that's the international standard.
Well, I mean, they reviewed both of the calls, which, you could say bad calls that were missed calls, but they obviously, whatever their definition is different than maybe the ones
in my
we
mind,
see.
if a defenseman or even checking forward like Baudouin, if you go straight at the player and you've locked your legs in position and you go and you catch enough of the chest or the body or the shoulders or whatever, if there's incidental contact with the knee, then so be it. But in that first angle, it looked like he spun him around and he's grabbing his hamstring as opposed to his knee. But there, he's diving out of the way, and Baudouin still made significant contact with the upper part of his body. His left knee was between the other 2 knees, and watch the right knee. It's on the outside of his knee, clipped the outside of it. And Sikora went down, and then, hey, listen, I'm not going to call him a faker because I don't know. When you get shocked like that, you can feel like there's some damage there, and that. But,
second one.
And there's the other one. And again, Gibson did the same thing. He went straight at his man. He did not stick the knee out. He went and
didn't seem to alter his
Between the
course
legs.
whatsoever.
He didn't. It's a direct line. And we heard MJ talking about it on the broadcast. And
Anyways,
that's the first thing you look at.
But hey, listen, people are going to look at it, and there's going to be a lot of people that say, you know what, that's international hockey. It's a knee. And as I say, I looked at it. I didn't think Baudouin's was a major, and I didn't think that other one was a penalty. But the referee did, and that's all that matters. And they dug themselves a hole by playing Czech Republic in this game.
Both things can be true. They may have gotten robbed in this game, but they sealed their own fate by the way they played against Latvia, by the way they played against the Americans, by the way they played in the first period of this game.
And I mentioned the coach, and we've all talked about the refereeing. When I've done this tournament, they've won the gold medal. The first thing I do is praise the players for their play on the ice because they're the ones that get it done. They're the ones that go on the power play. They make great plays and they score goals. So I'm not going to bypass all of them and go right to you got to talk about the players on the ice and what they were doing. Dave Cameron put them all on the ice in positions to score, whether it be power play. He thought he had the right combinations. They were on the ice a lot, and they just didn't get the job done. They were not good enough for the majority of the tournament to have success.
And I'm
Plain and
interested.
simple.
I'm surprised they didn't go back to some familiarity, maybe Rakoff, Martone as well. Just knowing that there wasn't that chemistry that had been happening, all tournament long. You got to find ways to push buttons to see that chemistry. But it really, from line 1 right down, I thought Cat and Richie did have some chemistry, but there was never sort of that third to make that line, that total line.
It seemed like whatever combination they did have a great period. They did find something, but it seemed like whatever they came up with, it wasn't going to be good enough.
And to be truthful, in that third period, right near the end, after they got the tying goal, they could have been up by 1. Right, and then there was a missed call on McKenna as well. I believed it was a missed call, but certainly, they had the pace of play. They just couldn't finish and get that go ahead, and then of course that penalty was called.
I think criticism of the players is fair. Criticism of the coaching is fair. Criticism of the management for the players they brought, which started basically from the time the team was announced, is also fair, although unanswerable because we will never know if it would have been different with this player or that player. It's all fair. I also don't hope, though, there's as you say, Bob, sometimes when Canada loses, there's a freak out and these kids get attacked online.
Yes.
They all wanted this badly. They all tried extremely hard. They're all way more devastated than any of us are. So just take it easy on them. But criticize fair. Take it easy beyond that for teenagers.
We have a front row seat to the effort. Right? Those guys are going out there, they're working hard, they're giving everything they got. It was just the execution just wasn't there. They weren't connected. It almost seemed disconnected at times. But when you're talking about effort, every guy that put that Canadian jersey on wanted to win this game and played their heart out. It just didn't find the back of the net at the right time.
That was the first third period, really, outside of maybe the Finland game, where you felt like Pinelli played great.
Yes.
Jagger played great. Howe played great. Guys further down the lineup, everybody stepped up. And over the course of the game, that was by far Braden Jagger's best game. That was by far Tanner Howe's best game. And as I said, they did everything they needed to potentially send the game to overtime. But
this is another unanswerable question. But you felt like if they got through that game, they probably would have been gangbusters against Sweden in the semifinal, and who knows?
Yeah, because they had something to hold on to and move forward with, and then it's all up in smoke.
Just some other things that cost them 11 goals against in the tournament, 7 of them on the power play. So the PK in the end was not good enough. We mentioned that they get knocked out in the quarterfinals for the first time ever 2 years in a row.